follow your inner voice, because everyone tries to tell you, what to do from their perspective, but they're not you. And it's only you that's going to have the passion and grit to push through. So focus on what you're passionate about and do something you truly love and go deep.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. It is going to be a super fun episode. I have my buddy, Brian Burke. He is the founder and head MacMan at Sell Your Mac, which he ran for almost 20 years until he sold it to Otherworld Computing, where he is still in their HR system, also still called MacMan. I'm probably the only person in the entire world in any HR system where you are called MacMan. But you are also a LinkedIn extraordinaire, master, TEDx speaker, professional sommelier. I mean, professional, I guess, debatable what that means, but you have your skill set there. And just a man of a million different things. And Brian, it is such a pleasure to have you here on this today. We actually needed to just force ourselves to get started because we were just shooting this shit too much pre-recording. So Brian, thank you for getting on here. And I'm so excited for all the things I'm going to learn. And I know our audience is going to learn as well.
Awesome to be here, Adam. And yes, we had a great chat already and so much fun stuff to share with your audience, and ready to dive in and talk about being excellent entrepreneurs and everything else in life.
Let's start there. Briefly once again, I already went over a little bit of your background, right? You basically founded this company almost 20 years ago. You've done a bunch of other sort of entrepreneurial activities, and I think you probably can't even help yourself fully. But before we dive into your background, let's just start off right at the beginning. How do you define excellent entrepreneurship? What is it? What does being an excellent entrepreneur look like or mean to you? What's your definition?
Incredible grit. There are situations you're going to be faced with that if you do not have the energy and passion and grit to push through, you will fail time and again. And the reason you can grow a company to actually get to a meaningful point is because you're able to push through so many instances where other people would just give in and fail. I mean, the average person literally is not willing to put in the time and energy when their doors are shut to break through that door. And it took hardship, tears, blood, and so much time. I mean, I was working 14, 16-hour days for 10 years when I founded the company. And most people don't realize the energy it takes to actually grow a successful business. I put that time in.
So that's a fantastic point, and it's true. Define grit a little bit more, right? So grit, I think people theoretically know what that means, but why do you have more grit than someone else? And did you know that about yourself early on? Why were you okay? Because everyone thinks they have grit, probably. Everyone listens, oh yeah, I definitely have grit. But do you really? And how did you know you had grit? Or did you know you had grit 20 years ago when you started to sell your Mac? Or is that something you learned?
I think I developed it, and I was always willing to, kind of do things other people weren't. In college, for instance, I was buying, selling cell phones. Most people didn't want to have a job. They wanted to just, be lazy, I guess, and just enjoy college, which is awesome. But I actually wanted to enjoy college and make money. So I had this, great side hustle business where I'd go around and, meet people and buy their phones. And just the fact that I was willing to put the time in to learn that and then learn the customer service side, both in person and online, to help me develop the grit to get through some of those situations later. And, also it's just being able to have the right people around you to make sure that they can support you so you can focus and have the grit to push through. If you don't have that support system from your family, your partner and stuff like that, sometimes it'll be harder to, kind of push forward.
So, I mean, that sounds nice, right? And it sounds okay, well, lucky Brian, he had the support system in place. Was that luck? Was it just, hey, you lucky to be born into a good family where you had that opportunity, or did you create that support system for yourself? What did that look like?
Definitely lucky to be part of a good family. My parents are very supportive. They were supporting me at my highs and at my lows. And also I saw in them the grit that, they developed. My dad is a doctor. He just retired this year after 50 years of being a pediatric ophthalmologist and eye surgeon. And, he went to work every single day. My mom was the office manager the last 25 years. And, there was not a day they missed basically. And they go on, short vacations, but they worked very hard. And I saw that. And that helped me develop the grit just by seeing it in my family and someone that I really respected, like my parents.
Yeah, I legit, I feel like a lot of founders I talk to, it's sort of similar with something in their childhood where they kind of have that coming from them. And then, so grit's critical. And then how did you think you developed that? Still that there's lots of people who come from really good families and who are very supportive parents who have no drive or energy to go sell cell phones and build a small cell business with their friends. Like, why did you do that? Given what you described to your parents, like, I don't obviously know their exact economic situation, but they were probably, you weren't scrounging for food every day. Like, you were well off enough that you were okay. So you didn't need to make this extra, you didn't need a side hustle. You could have gone off and fucked off and apologize for my language, like, and gone and get.
Is this an explicit podcast? Should I be adding more color to my language?
Probably, but try to keep it PG. But you could have gone and said, like, hey, I'm not going to go do this stuff. I'm going to go do, I'm going to play video games, whatever. And yet you decided to build a business, even though you presumably didn't need the money.
I always wanted more in life. And at some point you kind of have to be able to buy your freedom. And if I had to work for someone else and, go according to their schedule, I'm never going to really truly feel free. And that was one of the things I saw early on, as I wanted to, travel the world and be able to enjoy my life. And I didn't want to wait until a traditional age of, retirement at 65 or whatever age it might be now. So I want to be able to have that flexibility, at a younger age. And I was very fortunate that I worked hard to be able to build that for myself.
And so going back to grit a little before we kind of move off of grit, what do you have some like examples of times where you had to be like really gritty, where it's like, okay, almost once in like 18 and a half years of Sell Your Mac and now another 2.5. So really 20 years now doing this, where you really had to dig deep and be gritty. Like, what examples could come to mind? You're like, oh man, I remember that 3 years in where we almost went broke or something. I mean, like, what are some examples?
There's so many good examples. I'll hit on a couple of big ones. I was doing the biggest deal of my life at the time, purchasing about 26 pallets of Macs, and they're coming from Australia. And just getting that deal here was a lot of logistics. But once it was here,
how much is 26? Like, give people a little context, actually. Maybe back up before you answer this. One, sure. Explain Sell Your Mac a little bit, how it works, what the business is. And then two, to get to this grit point, how much is 26 pallets of Macs worth? Is that like many millions of dollars of computers? And
that was a $250,000 deal. They were a little bit older.
Okay.
But, Sell Your Mac buys and sells all of Apple products. So when someone has a Mac, it's 3 or 4 years old and they're going to go get a new one, they go to sellyourmac.com, they get an instant quote what their Mac is worth, and they can trade it in to help fund that new purchase. So we were helping people upgrade and always be on top of their Apple devices. So 26 pallet of Macs, bought them from Australia. They land here. You have to fill all these customs forms. Customs would not release them. They were saying I didn't have the proper documentation showing, the origin of the computers, and everything I provided, which I thought was correct, finding examples online, wasn't good enough for them. And they needed some special number that no one had access to. And everyone in my industry hadn't had the same problem, apparently. And it just took so much legwork. And at the same time, I have, this $250,000, it's like all my cash tied up in these Macs, sitting in a customs office. Every day that goes by, I have to pay for storage. So I'm like, the gun's at my head to try to figure this out. And it took 2 weeks to get this number from Foxconn in China to showcase this like battery, like verification that I can't even believe I even needed this information, but that's what the government wanted to see. And they wouldn't help me out. They wouldn't tell me where to go get it or anything like that. So I finally got it and I got them released. But if I didn't, like, my business basically would have been like bankrupt.
It's crazy. And so like, that's one example of great. You're just like finding a way to get it done. You're just like, hit it off, hit until you get this thing done. And like, I almost was expecting you to tell me you flew to China and like just camped.
I was ready. I had anything I needed to do. Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay. So you're like, all right, we need to get this moving. Go get that done. Like, you must have had, over 20 years, you must have had turnover on the team. You must have had key people leave. Maybe not. Maybe you're lucky. Like, what did you have team issues? Did you have other customer issues? On any
Well, of course, you guys team issues. Everyone has HR issues, right? That's why it's nice to have some outsourced backup, like sure, but didn't have that back then.
Right. Yep.
I had one of my GMs leave, and at the time he told me he was going to go work for Google, and it turned out it wasn't the case, and we started a competing company shortly thereafter.
Wait, how long had you worked with him?
8 to 10 years.
Oh my gosh! And then he lied to your face, and he said, "I'm going to Google," and in fact, he was actually going to start a competitor.
His sister worked at Google, so there might have been. I think he did some like side jobs there, but he wasn't, like a full-time employee. I don't want to badmouth him, but it didn't work out saying what he says he was going to do, and then the competing company, that wasn't very cool. And I had to, push through not only doing the work that he did to pick it up, but also not go overboard on the fact that he's competing with me. And I kind of took the high road. I wasn't trying to file any lawsuits or anything like that. I mean, I didn't have anything saying he couldn't, frankly. I mean, NDAs usually aren't worth much anyways, which I've learned. So yeah, you just be a better business. And, I sold my company and his is not in business anymore.
I mean, that's well said. And so that comes down, maybe turns it back around to grit, right? Which is, in the end, and I've gone through similar things, by the way, where in the end, you just have to say, this is really annoying. I can't believe someone would act that way. At the same time, I just need to keep pushing through and build a better business in them and beat them on the essentially court of public opinion or court of business opinion. They're going to spend their money with me because I'm better, I'm more ethical, I'm faster, I'm higher quality, and I'm someone people want to work with and not this other person in their business.
100%. I could give so many more examples. I mean, it just comes down to when you have an impasse and you have to push through, and it's going to take some incredible amount of time and energy to figure it out. And you just literally cannot stop until it's figured out.
Yeah. And so when you think through building the business, like walk me through a little bit. Okay. Like actually, let's then go back. Let's use a little bit of history right now. Do a little history lesson. Go back to Brian in college at Tulane, or in high school, I guess you're selling trying to resell phones to friends.
For people that don't know, I went to college with your brother.
Yes, you did. That's how we originally met. But so walk me through how the genesis of you as an entrepreneur. Where did okay, you're selling phones, like that's an early entrepreneur.
I got to go back earlier, man. I was selling stuff at age 10.
Great. I love that. That's actually, so you were born entrepreneur, essentially.
I always wanted to flip things, and it was mostly arbitrage sales throughout my entire life. Really? I mean, yeah, my best arbitrage sales were Audi car parts in high school. I was a super Audi fan, and I would go on and buy them on these forums and then flip them on eBay or vice versa. And, someone couldn't find the part and I could.
I mean, these were early days of eBay. How did you get into that? And you must have been pretty young, even like to think about cars in general. And like, you're like, how did that even come about? Like, you're like, I'm going to like, what I'm trying to ask. Like,
I mean, the first car I ever got was an Audi. It was my dad's old car. And I was into like finding parts to, kind of soup it up, make it more fun and stuff like that. So doing that research, I found out I could buy stuff, from China, for example, and sell back to someone in the US that they want 2-day shipping. They don't want to wait 2 weeks or whatever it might be. And I could find this stuff and, make 50% margin on it and just flip it.
So this is actually one other thing that I think I hear from a lot of entrepreneurs that makes them also unique is their willingness to go really deep on a topic, not because it's like, I'm going to make money on it, like, which you feel forced. It's because like, you just were interested in doing this for your car. Like, I mean, one of my things is an example right now of longevity. And I have a very much full-time job and a bunch of other things that I'm trying to do. But on the side, like I will sit here instead of watching TV, I'll sit here and research about longevity stuff and how do I get healthier and feel better.
I love it
every day. And for me, that also leads to me like hopefully
we got to talk more about that.
I would love to, but like that's a side thing for me right now. It's not my job. I'm doing this solely because I'm interested. The crazy thing
you'll do your job better and longer the more you research that.
100%. Like literally I wake up more well rested. Yes, I'm stressed. Like I woke up last night at like 4 a.m. stressed about a bunch of work things, but I managed to go back to sleep. I feel good today. I'm like hopefully on point so we can have a great podcast. I can do good work for the rest of my team.
You look great and awake.
Thank you. I'm trying to, mostly getting older, but yeah, feeling great. And I think I am. But like the one last point about longevity stuff that I'll make is like, as an entrepreneur, what I find is, and tell me if this is true for you. I went deep on this because I find it interesting. So someday maybe I go into longevity, And the crazier part, just like to my own horn, I guess, is like when I talk to people who are doing their business in the longevity space, and like I talk to them about stuff and they're like, oh, I've never heard of that, or I don't know about that. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Like,
wow,
literally,
they're so close to it. They're not even researching the other aspects.
Correct. Which leads me to think you're probably going to fail if that's their job and their business. And I know more than they do.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at a longevity conference.
You have to read so much about your, whatever your career is to understand the industry, and the competitive analysis and stuff like that is so crucial, I think.
Correct. But the only way to do that is because you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
Because you're true. Like
all starts with passion.
Your Audi stuff. You weren't doing that. Like, yeah, you found out you can make money doing it. Cool.
Every business I did is because I was passionate.
Right. So, okay. So go back to your story. Audi flipping car parts. Then what happened?
So yeah, I had the knack for eBay, flipping the car parts. And then in college, I saw the opportunity to flip the cell phones because people didn't want to deal with them. So I flipped the cell phones. I looked for a job on Wall Street getting out of college. Didn't get it right away. I went back to...
Why did you want to do Wall Street? Was it just because like that was like the thing to do and your parents would be proud of you? You're a big Wall Street guy now?
I love stocks. I've been a stock trader and picker since I was 13 since my bar mitzvah. I won some contests, in grade school doing stock stuff, and just have a really, really good knack for stock picking.
Nice. That would be another fun thing for us to geek out on, because let's come back to that later because it's not a financial discussion, maybe see your financial advice. And
I just started a finance podcast called Bullish and Beyond, so I can talk more about my stock ideas and helping people upgrade.
Let's have a chat there, because I've gone I used to do that. I think I used to be pretty good at it. I've come around to saying it's not my core competency, and therefore I'm going to buy just broad-based ETFs generally, because I don't have alpha in my decision-making there for specific stocks, and I don't have the time and energy to focus on it. And I think that's probably sound advice for the large majority of people. But that's my Zant there. I would love to talk to you about it on your podcast at some point, because I find financial stuff fascinating. I have my own little, very small, I do to it, financial newsletter that I send out 2 times a year to it's like 15 people. It's not meant to be a big thing that I'm sharing.
Oh, add me to the list.
I will add you that. I have a new one coming, and it's pretty negative, actually. So spicy take on things.
So back to the passion
story. Yes.
I mean, that then led me to try to sell, more electronic stuff, after college. And ultimately that led to a focus on Apple a couple years later. I was very broad-based electronic flipper. And then I was like, hey, my passion really is Apple. That's what I want to, dive into and, share with the world. So that's when I started Sell Your Mac. And there was a gap in the industry that there weren't very many places to trade in your devices. So I wanted to provide that to everyone. And because I was passionate about it, people wanted to work with me, and that helped me substantially grow the company.
How did you figure out, a few things. One, how did you decide that was like your real passion area, right? I can imagine hey, I'm flipping a bunch of electronic devices. They're all cool. Like, they're all cool in all different ways. Like, you and I are super nerd tech guys. Like, I don't buy a lot of tech devices, but man, I watch like the reviews about every single one still today. Like, that's my free time that I find between all these other things. Like, I'll watch tech reviews because it's my way of like trying a new device without actually having to do a Slayer app and all that stuff. But how did you really decide like Apple was the thing 20 years ago?
I mean, it was my go-to. I've been using Mac since I was 10 years old. And I think because I was very just passionate about it from a young age, it just carried over. And every device I used at that point basically, was an Apple device. So it wasn't, I think I was a kind of typical Apple fanboy.
Why? So fair enough. And then why that instead of like sticking with Audi or car parts? Like, there's lots of good, probably car import, export, car selling, reselling parts businesses even today. Why not stick with car parts? Or like, what helped you really hone?
I think the car industry was probably flooded. I mean, I didn't do any extensive research on it, but there was only a couple websites back then that actually did the Apple trade-in. Gazelle is the kind of biggest household name back then that people, were familiar with. Gazelle was my number one competitor.
I think Gazelle now, do they switch from that into, they're your number one competitor today, right? Because they do.
No, back then.
But isn't Gazelle also a company?
They're still around.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because I've seen them. I thought about selling my random devices there too. On them. Anyways. Okay. So you start.
But they're not Apple experts. So being an Apple expert, we're able to value the devices better. We pay a lot more for, upgraded features, and we understand the problems better. So, A lot of companies like, on Apple trade-in, for example, if you have a bad battery, it's basically like a $0 trade-in. First, for us, we know what it costs to trade it and we're going to fix it in-house. So we're able to kind of, pay people more money, across the board, whether they have problems or whether they have a higher end unit.
And I assume at that point, did Apple have their own trade-in program then? I mean, I know they do nowadays, but
not back in the day. No, that was definitely helpful, and they were quite the competitive force when they came in.
I can only imagine, right? Because they have essentially eyeballs into everybody. They have the ideal go-to-market plan since they essentially own the platform. I mean, they do have.
Yes. But if you search for Apple trade-in, we rank right after Apple.
That's pretty impressive. I'm sure. And I think you're also an SEO expert. So another thing to get into talking about. But actually, that's part of it. Like, you had to learn all these skills. So you go into this 20 years ago. So is that right out of college? Is that right out of college?
That's the grit piece again. Being willing to spend the time to, learn SEO and understand digital marketing and all these things behind the scenes. I'm like, yeah, you can hire people. I had an SEO team, but at the same time, understanding it myself to be able to have the right insights to, rank organically. And that's how organic search is our number one thing in our company. Like, we get 80% of our traffic from organic, which is insane. If I had to pay for those leads, I'd be paying, $10,000 a day.
So, okay. So I want to talk about how you kind of built all these skills to some extent, but walk me through, 20, did you start Sell Your Mac straight out of college? Like, you didn't get a job at Wall Street, thank goodness.
Right.
And
it was a predecessor of Sell Your Mac. It wasn't called that, but it was the same business that then morphed into Sell Your Mac.
Okay. So you started that, and you went to Tulane for college. So did you stay in New Orleans? Or you moved to Florida? Like, where did you go? And and you're from Cincinnati, right? Or the Cincinnati?
Yeah, from Cincinnati. I moved back home after college, and that's where I started the business.
In your parents' basement, and you're like, well, I'm going to put up a website and let's start selling stuff.
I only had 3 months in my parents' basement. They kicked me out because they said I overran their basement in their house because I had so much stuff they didn't know what to do. So then I moved to an apartment and overran that. Then I had to buy a house to run it out of my house.
Oh my gosh. And so it kept growing.
Kept growing.
And did you hire a team then? Like, walk me through the early days. Like, what did that look like in the early days when you're building the business? Like, what are the key things you sort of did in those early days?
I realized I had a great supply coming in. I had all these reps selling me their phones, week over week, but I couldn't actually test and list them fast enough. So that's when I hired my first person.
How did your supply, sorry to interrupt there, but like, how did your supply come in? How did you put this website up, great, but like, is it just that easy for you? Because you found a niche in the market and you're like, well, we have a website. It's pretty clear what we do, Sell Your Mac. And people just started calling you. Was it like that easy?
I was kind of going back pre-website in my head right now when I hired my first employee. Okay. But when the website came out, it was kind of like year 3, but I had a website, but it wasn't Sell Your Mac. It was called I Buy Sells.
How are people finding you then? Like you said, people are calling you and selling you stuff.
I built crazy relationships with all these Verizon retailers, and back then Verizon didn't have a trade-in program. So now when you go there, they'd offer you money for your phone, you'll get a new iPhone. Back then, you go buy a phone for $200, and people would give their old phone to the rep. So when I made this great friend, his name Brad Bonds, and he kind of spread the word on the internet that I was the new phone buyer. And these people just had sacks of phones saved up, and they were collecting them, kind of weekly. So I had such an influx of phones so quickly, I almost didn't even know what to do with it. I mean, I made relationships with people that he was connected with that had thousands of phones saved up. It was like goldmine to go through. I was busy as ever.
How do you, okay, so like even then, like, okay, so like, there's thousands of phones to go through. You're one guy straight out of college.
So that's why I hired more people. I needed people to test the phones, physically clean them, get them ready. And then I did all the kind of listing and the customer service on the back end.
And were you just then listing it like on eBay? You're just like,
yeah, 50 to 100 phones a day.
That's crazy. And then I hope you can talk about this. Like, what were margins like back then? You're like, okay, you bought 1,000 phones for pennies on the dollar, and
the margins were so good. I mean, people just wanted money for them. I was buying them for, $5 to $10, for example. And then they'd sell for, $70, $80. I would add a charger, a car kit and a case.
Make it look good.
Yeah. You buy these things for $1 a piece, in crazy bulk. I I had tons of razors, so I buy 100 pack of razor chargers. It's like, that was the name of the game. You have to be able to, buy and scale and bundle it.
Why do you think the people you're buying from weren't doing the same thing? Like, to me, it seems like an obvious thing. Like, I have 1,000 phones sitting here. I'm going to go list these on eBay.
It just wasn't their day job. A lot of people don't want that extra hustle. I mean, they might have already been working, 8 to 10 hours a day as a sales phone rep, for example, and, have a family, whatever else. And they didn't want to spend an extra 3 hours a day doing eBay. And eBay is a pain in the ass a lot of times. I mean, the customer service in eBay can be very difficult. If you're not used to dealing with negative feedback and any problems that might crop up, it could be hard to push through. So, I mean, I learned eBay intricately. I've actually thought about writing a book about how to do eBay. And of course, it's changed a lot since then. But I became an eBay master. I mean, I was 100% feedback across 45,000 transactions when I sold the company.
Holy shit. You be careful about cussing. So that's great. in over 45,000, was that mostly you writing back to every single person? Be like, here's my answer. Here's what the thought is. You were just like maniacal about that.
I was always up on the customer service. Yeah, I was instantaneous responses. I mean, back in the day, I had a hard time sleeping at night. I would wake up you mentioned waking up at 4 a.m. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and have to answer a bunch of emails real quick because I wanted people to get that kind of instant response. And that made sales and made loyal customers.
So how did you then, okay, so now you're growing the team. So let's maybe talk about customer service a little bit too, right? So this is an area you were super focused on. I want people to have a great response. To me, that seems like one where you probably could hand that off and delegate it to someone else. And I'm sure at some point you did.
I probably could have, yes. I should have done it earlier.
Okay, but when you did hand it off, one, how long did it take for you to hand that off? How did you decide when to hand that off? And then when you handed it off, how did you make sure that someone was doing it at the level that you, clearly this crazy high bar that you set? How did you make sure you got the right person in that role?
Took me a long time to hand it off. And besides the customer service, it was also just the intimate knowledge of the product I was listing. So I knew in my head what I should list it for with, usually very minimal research because I was just so familiar with that SKU. So instead of trying to teach someone how to research the product and then adjust it for grading and whatever it came with, I just knew right away. The pictures were there. I could just fly through them. So the training in my head, always would take more time to kind of look at it and check up on it. So it took me a while to give it off. Yeah. So I had to find the right person that could do it well. Yeah.
But this is standard founders being able to delegate stuff where you're I know it all in my head. I'm faster than you at this. It's more time than it's worth to hand it off. Obviously, that's not true in the long run.
I know.
Start doing things that are undifferentiated and you're not good at. But it's that now. But so at the time, you still obviously at some point decided to hand it off. So what were the steps you took to build the process, build a hiring funnel, build a process around training someone, and then making sure they really do that well because it's really hard. You probably had some false hires where it didn't work out. And you went back to the drawing board and it's really annoying. I hired this person, they seem great. And then 6 months later, they are failing and maybe faster than that, probably 3 months if you're being quick about it. Failing, got to move on and you got to start the hiring process all over again, training process all over.
It's all about the process, like you said. So you put the right tool in place. So you have the template, exactly what needs to go in all these different fields and how to do it. And then I have, examples of how to, this is the A+ way to fill this all out. And then you have the person in the role start to do it and you coach them through the process, get check up on it afterwards. And after he had done a few hundred, he was good to go. And it was very minimal checking at that point. And at that time, after he'd done thousands, for example, then I only look at ones that were super high value. All right, let's look at the top, 1% of the listings to see if there's anything else I could add to it. And then it's better off having them run with it.
So what heuristics did you use to hire, let's say for that role, for the customer support sort of role, but also for the other roles that you had? And by the way, maybe that's a good opportunity. How many people, what was growth rate like from a people perspective? So you started with one person, you hire now another, it's just you hire some more people. By year 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, how many people were at that company?
Year 3, there's about 5 people. Year 10, about 12 people. And I ended with 22.
So small. Small.
Yeah, small team.
I don't know how much you're okay talking about, but how much money were you sort of spending or sloshing through the system where it comes from purchase to sale, not your revenues maybe, but your profit maybe, but what was mean, you must have been doing like millions of dollars a year in like money flowing back and forth.
Yeah, we got to over 10 million in revenue.
That's crazy.
A lot of max sales.
With 22 people. You said 22
Uh-huh.
people? Like, that's crazy. That's huge. So very efficient. What were things you put in place to...
I wish it was higher margin. No, there's not enough margin in this business.
I mean, but so actually what that's another interesting discussion we talk about. Like, we'll come back to that. I want to talk about like what happened to margin over time, because you said early on, like margins were amazing. So
competitors came in.
That's how the business works. So how do you make sure you build a moat, and maybe you didn't build a moat that you wanted to build? But before we get to that, talk me through a little bit on the LinkedIn hiring front. What were hiring decisions you made, hiring decisions you regretted? What processes did you put in place? What are things you think people should learn about how to hire well, or in fire fast maybe too?
Should have fired faster many times, but it's something we learn as entrepreneurs. I will say for the customer service role, the person I was talking about that is doing the eBay listings, they'd been at the company already for a few years. So they saw how maniacal I was about saying that we have to have 100% customer service. Every person gets immediate answers. There's not like a 24-hour wait to get back to them. It's the email comes in. Let's get back to them. Let's make the sale before they email the next person on eBay. So I was on top of that. So when I handed it over, they knew that nothing short of perfection was going to be good enough. And they had to stay on top of it. And the expectation was set very early on. And, I don't come down hard on people. I think I'm a very nice boss. So I'm good at, coaching up if they miss something. Hey, here's how I would have handled it. And then when there's something super difficult, I'll show them how to take care of it. Like, hey, let me call this person. You sit here on the phone with me and you can see how I deal with this, crazy customer. So then you know how to do it next time.
Yep. And did the people you had on the team, those 22 people, what was like the average tenure of people on the Sell Your Mac team?
My leadership team was around for over 10 years. Wow. So very long. Most people there almost no one left, put it that way. Everyone stayed around. Yeah. I built a great culture, easy to work with. And, we all kind of bonded.
What were some of the cultural touch points you're like, I would recreate this if I could again? Like, what did you do where you're like, this was really good, or things you think that were really bad too? Like, what would you do the same if you do another company someday, or do differently?
Fun events were always great. Finding stuff that people actually wanted to go to. Like, you have to ask the team. If the founder just does stuff that they want to do, maybe the team like hates it. And you wonder why there's like a, low attendance at your events and stuff like that. But if you ask the team, hey, I have 3 ideas, let's say, it's not maybe that's not 100% open-ended, but do we want to go on a ski trip? Do you want to go to Topgolf, or you guys want to go to the casino? Like, all right, you pick. And then whatever they like, all right, we're actually going to go have fun together as a team. And, they picked it. They want to do it. So it's not just the leader kind of imposing stuff on them. And I think those times out as a team, you talk about things that you never talk about at the workplace. Sometimes after a few beers or something, things come out that are very interesting you might learn about. So yeah, it's a great time to learn about the individual team members and also come up with, creative ideas that aren't talked about, at the office every day.
How did compensation play a role in team, in like turnover or lack thereof in your case? Like, did you, where did you pay, you think, compared to the industry average, or was pay like how did you think through compensation for people? Because that plays a role.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it's not the only part that was important to the team for that sort of long-term tenure.
I think my comp was good, for the small business level. I mean, I'm certainly the people that were leading the company maybe could have gone to a larger company and made more, but then they would have, worked more hours and had, less autonomy. So the things I provided besides pay, or, they could do whatever they wanted. They set their own times. There was no exact, 9 to 5. It wasn't like that. There's obviously expectations. You're at the office and doing work, but just like way more flexibility around life. And I never told someone they couldn't do something for their family or anything like that. And if there was anything that had to happen, they were 100% free to go take care of it. And that's actually how I got a couple of my amazing team members. They had issues with Apple. And even though I'm a massive Apple fan, they have some issues with HR of, getting people, they can't get days off when they need it. I mean, one of my best team members wanted to leave to go to his grandma's funeral in Brazil, and they told him no. He said, I quit.
Worked for Apple?
He worked for Apple. And he's like, I quit. Like, this is my matriarch of the family. I'm going. It's not even a choice. And then right when you came back looking for a job, I was the Apple guy in town. So, and that happened with 2 people of like just crazy stories about them getting told no. And I was always yes.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And I think it's a really key one. It's one that we follow as well at Shore in a big way, where we're fully remote, which we've probably talked about a little bit too. You started you started your Mac in the pre-remote days.
There was no remote back in back then.
but it's the same general philosophy where we say, hey, look, get your job done. And we track people pretty closely. We have clear metrics of what that means, but we don't track hours. I don't care, at least not this. We don't track hours in that way. Like, I don't care how many hours it is for you to do your job. I care that you are doing your job, and I don't care when you're doing your job, so long as the outcome is delight for our customers.
I mean, someone can work half as much and do double the potential ROI than some person is sitting in the office for 8 hours, hardly working. I'm like, I hate the hourly mindset, and I'm very happy that I'm in a role that I'm not tracked hourly, and I'm just absolutely crushing it. So yeah, you put in the effort, you make the connections, you might be able to work a little bit less time because of that.
Yeah, and that also is a different discussion about people in general, but I think a lot of folks don't recognize that working hard and getting good at something gives you a lot of freedom to make different choices and decisions. Same with just being an entrepreneur, of course. Like a good entrepreneur, the harder you work, the more freedom you end up doing for yourself. And actually, going back to your point about investing, tell me if this resonates with you, but I very much believe that the idea that your career is one where you're making investments throughout your career in life. And that's actually in life too. You're making investments in relationships. You're making investments in your job. If you bounce around or you have lots of different relationships or something, you're probably never going to build anything enduring or great. On the other hand, if you're willing to stick with it and put in the hard effort, good things will come, but it doesn't happen overnight. And maybe it's a mentality today with like social media, and you get a dopamine hit every time you see a new video, but you need to make these investments. And it's sort of the same thing. It's like, oh man, look at Brian and all the success you have, and the 250,000 followers on LinkedIn and all these other things that you've like succeeded with. That was a 20-year overnight success.
People always wonder how I built my LinkedIn. It's like, it took a long time and so many hours. Like, there is not like a secret sauce. I was doing 4 hours a day of LinkedIn for 4 years to grow that.
Yep. Yeah. And so, okay. So going back to the teams. Okay. So building the teams, growing, what did you must have built process though? Like, so you're getting millions of devices a year, hundreds of thousands, whatever the number is of devices. There has to be like a floor of like clean, bring it in.
Tens of thousands, just a ballpark for everyone.
Tens of thousands. How did you build up this sort of warehouse factory process to make sure things are flowing through properly? You must have there's even small things like security. Like, how do you make sure you're securing your warehouse? Because at some point, probably you become a target. Everyone's like, they sell your Mac guy warehouse is right there with you.
It's unfortunately it has happened. They haven't got away with a lot. But the process we helped put in place was custom software that basically ran every aspect of the business.
Wait, you had your own software?
I did.
Explain that. Why
took a very long time, and there was lots of I could have gone with an SAP system, then customize it to do what we do. But you couldn't actually get down to the nitty gritty small things that kind of were our secret sauce. So I saw that I needed to make the custom software. I don't know if I would do it again in hindsight because it took us such a long time and such a big effort going back to that grit piece. But I saw the vision that if I created this, it would basically walk through every step. And our software does every single step of the workflow, and it takes very little insight to know what to do next because it's telling you and it's pushing the item through every process. So you don't have to. I could hire a beginner and show them how to do it in day one, and they'd be off to the races. So there isn't a big learning curve, and then it helps grade things and add certain notes in a certain way that if it was all generic and the person just typing it in randomly, it'd be really hard to do.
So why didn't you, on that note then, why did you build your own software instead of going with an off-the-shelf solution that you would sort of customize in the front end or something?
You couldn't get all the right fields in, I didn't think. And seeing what the software we use, now as the larger entity, like there's clear gaps, even though we have customized it, that you can't get the workflows. Maybe you can get all the fields, but the workflow to go through that exact process, you couldn't do it all inside of one system. And maybe there's a bunch of add-ons, now that I could do because the industry's grown so much. But back then you couldn't.
But how do you weigh out then? This is an interesting question. How do you weigh out the pros and cons of building something custom versus not? So I hear you. Like the thing is what you're saying to me when you're saying that, I'm like, oh, but this is what every company says. I'm unique. I'm a special little snowflake. I'm not different. You need to customize it. And it's fine. And like I used to help companies customize, and I used to help companies migrate onto Salesforce for a little while. And they always wanted to customize it totally, make all these new fields because like we're special and unique. And a year or two later, they come back and make, oh my God, this is a complete mess. All these fields we added, we thought we needed then, and we don't actually need. But now we have all this weird kind of orphan data.
Yep.
And I would say to them, I was like, well, that's why I told you not to customize it much. Like just use the off-the-shelf stuff. You're not that different. What did you think at the time? And like, how would you now do it differently? Say, maybe we don't customize. Like we'll customize the software, but we don't want to manage and own this whole thing because now you have to have someone who's doing bug fixing for your own software, which is not your core competency.
Full time. I had no idea how long it was going to take to build the custom software. I think our initial plan was about 2 years and it took 6. And it went 3x over budget. And one of the issues is that the business was evolving and changing. So to your point about the orphan data, we would do something and 2 years later, be like, oh, we don't even need that feature anymore. Now we have to like unwind this workflow or change it a certain way. So we're changing stuff before we even got it launched. So I would, first of all, get that product out faster and get it, really in use quicker. But a lot of the things in the industry were kind of geared towards PC. There wasn't a lot of like Apple, Mac specific software. And that was really the issue. If I was a normal PC company, I think I could have bought something off the shelf, fairly easily.
Okay. Okay. So that was another lesson learned. What other things, when you think through like hiring growth, actually, let's talk about growth, right? You are a growth expert, I would say. Someone who, you were able to build this business into a $10 million revenue business, pretty scrappily, crushing it. What are the key elements that you think were really important for you to focus on early on? Things that in retrospect you should have focused on more? What are areas like founders should, even today, like I know you built this business over 20 years. Think about the entrepreneur today listening to this. What are things you're like, yep, I would still make this recommendation to go build any business. I don't care if it's a SaaS business or a hardware reseller business. Like what are the key areas to focus on?
I think hiring is key. Getting the first few hires right is really crucial. And, I think I could have gone with more A players at the start to grow the business much quicker. I didn't have enough people maybe investing, the highest level of energy to get it up, to get it to that next level quickly enough. So that's something I would do a little bit differently.
So before we go off on that, I want to ask there too, like it sounds easy to say, oh, I want to hire more A players. Like, give me a break. Like, it's hard to find A plus.
No, really hard. And I couldn't pay him enough. And that was one of my problems. I was writing the checks. So I couldn't go, give someone a signing bonus that's like 6 figures to bring them on. I couldn't do that.
So pretend again, you're this early stage company, going back to that area, like, yeah, you want to hire better people, but you can't afford it. So then what would you have done differently, or how would you have taken care of that given the constraints you have as an early stage entrepreneur?
I could have given away equity. I did not give away equity at the start. So that could have made a big difference by trying to bring on another, co-founder. At the time when I was really starting to kind of get my main hires around me, I was already a couple of years into the business. So at that, in my head, it didn't make sense to give away equity to bring on a co-founder kind of after I'd already built, something that was fairly successful. So, I gave them a very nice, comp package, but not actually straight equity.
So do you think that was, so in a sense, if you repeat that back to you, it's sort of, you could have or should have invested more in recruiting top tier people and given away more of the company. And do you think that would have changed the outcome that you achieved? Like you achieved a good outcome, but maybe not a great outcome. Would that have changed your trajectory? I mean, it's obviously no one knows for sure, but like,
I think so. It feels like it. I mean, before I sold the company, I investigated maybe hiring a president to, lead the organization, and just looking back at some of those people I had talked to, if I had hired them early on, I think would have been a completely different path. And part of it is the path, the stuff that they would have learned that I hadn't. Someone that, was, half a generation older than me that had already had the experience, being an executive at a company that had grown from 1 to 10 or to 100 million. I didn't have anyone on my team like that. I mean, yes, I had great mentors, but no one in the day-to-day trenches with me. If I could been the visionary and had that operator that I really needed, I think we could have grown the business exponentially bigger.
Okay. So hiring more A players and being willing to give away, essentially invest your equity to grow the pie, right? This to restate that, the thing that people I have trouble thinking about a lot, what I find to founders is your equity is essentially like cash, but the beauty of equity is that, I mean, you can't obviously you can't eat dinner off of equity, so it's not completely like cash, but the equity grows in value if you bring in the right people. And so I'd rather own 50% or even 10% of something worth many billions of dollars than 100% of something worth zero. Therefore, giving away equity to help to get people who will help me grow it to those places can be a really worthwhile investment.
I agree. And speaking of money, that's the other thing I wanted to mention is I did not raise any capital. And that's something I probably should have done. With the combination of the right people and then having the right purse to back it up, I think we could have bought a lot more Apple products.
Okay, so walk me through that. Like, okay, you're going to raise money. Let's pretend in an alternative universe you raise money. What would you have done with that, and how would that have changed the trajectory of your business? Especially because there's always a trade off, right? When you raise money,
Got to give away.
You're giving away equity, and you're giving away some level of control. Suddenly, I don't know if your board was like your parents or something, but like you now have a board you need to report to, who's expecting you to hit milestones, who may even have the power to fire you. What would you have done with that cash, and how would you have risk adjusted the control level that you give away for it?
I mean, I was always supply constrained at some point because I could not get enough funding to buy enough Apple products. Like I had a huge line of credit.
So you had lots of Apple devices you could buy, but like you just didn't have the cash for it, even with the line.
Yeah. And I was, flipping stuff maybe for a lower margin to get cash back. Like, oh, I'm just going to sell this deal off for $100,000 to make a little bit less instead of trickling it out over the next few months. I need to get the money back and buy my next deal. And I never made a serious effort to go raise money. It was kind of that tipping point of like, I didn't really want to give it away. So in my head, I was like, oh, like I'm okay where I'm at and just fine with the fact that I had to go sell this next deal. And I guess that was good that I knew people to sell it to. So I was able to kind of keep the business going that way. But if I raised funds, I could have had a little bit longer deal cycle and, had much more product listed for sale. And I couldn't sell what I didn't have listed. So I just had to go buy more of it.
Did you have people, you must have started reaching a tipping point where people reach out, right? I mean, I wouldn't say your business was sort of a traditional venture capital type deal, but like private equity probably started to be interested. A few other types of businesses. Did you either reach out and you just said no, like, I'm cool with where we are?
I had some people reaching out trying to buy the company and stuff like that, but no one that was trying to lend me the money at a great rate. I could have lent against my portfolio and stuff like that as well, but I didn't want to take too much personal risk. So I ended up never raising any outside money until the point when I sold the company to Other World Computing.
Did you? And so looking back on that, so it sounds like some of your major regrets are you didn't essentially invest enough of your equity in people. And I guess investing equity in trading equity for cash to help you do this next sort of level work. Is that right?
If I'd gone back and could have done it early enough when there was less competitors, I could have scaled much more quickly, that early. And I think we could have been, even bigger player in the space. And you look at some of the competitors that raised, hundreds of millions of dollars. So, I mean, they're out there.
And what do you think? So speaking of competitors, you were there first. What is the mistake you made once again, not saying I'm going to grow this bigger? Compared to them, do you think they're happier with the fact that they did raise all this money? I mean, they obviously gave up a lot to go raise that money. It seems cool to say oh, look, I raised a few $100 million. I'm a big player now.
Most of them aren't even profitable still.
Well, that's it. So
the biggest one is not profitable, and they've raised $500 million.
They raised $500 million. Is that a good trade-off then? Like if you're in their shoes, right? is that a good trade-off? Like, what did they win there? Like, maybe the founder took some money off the table.
They're probably way more stressed. I mean, so I never had anyone to report to. I did have a board of advisors, but yeah, they couldn't fire me. They had, nothing but advice to give, whether it was harsh or good. So it was nice having that freedom that I've been working for my whole life. Even during that, even though I made myself work incredibly hard, I'd be on vacation, working late at night, but it was me making myself work and, not an outside force or board. So yeah, there are major trade-offs. Does an entrepreneur want to raise money and work extra hard for someone else, or do they want to work hard for themselves and maybe not have quite the highest growth company, but they still own 100% of it?
Yeah, no, that is a trade-off every business person needs to think through. A lot of founders, certainly in Silicon Valley, I think it's sexy. I raise a lot of money from, I raise millions of dollars, which for a lot of people, they've never seen that sort of money in a bank account ever. And to see that in your,
it sounds good.
It sounds amazing. And you're like, oh, it's like a crazy idea. And then you're like, wait a second, there's strings attached, of course.
Now you got to spend it and execute on it.
Correct. So actually, I want to dive
in hindsight, I've probably just rated more debt because if I had enough better debt, I could have bought more Apple products and, still kept the business.
Is there a reason you didn't build more detailed, better relationships with banks to do that? Like, they probably saw your numbers. What was hard about building those relationships to get more debt?
They all wanted either a crazy high interest rate or they wanted me to risk my entire life that I had, they wanted my portfolio and my house on the line, basically. And I wasn't willing to do that at the time. So I didn't pull the trigger.
You think that was a big mistake?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, as an entrepreneur, I always want to grow so fast, but sometimes I look back on it and I'm like, I like my life. Like I don't need to be so stressed that I, burn out and it can't start something else in the future. And I think mental health is super important. You're talking about longevity. I mean, if you're running yourself into a wall every day, you're not going to be healthy for the future.
I totally agree. I think it also, the danger there becomes for a lot of founders. If you have that level of stress, you're probably not performing at your highest level. And that leads to a breakdown of your business's ability to succeed, irrespective of whoever you're taking money from. But if you're adding more stress to your life because of that adds up. So on the note of getting sort of like help or thoughts around the business, why did you build a board of advisors? How did you recruit people for that? What did that look like? Did you give them equity? Because that's something that I'm always curious about when people build a board of advisors. Sometimes they do it just for, look at all these great advisors and they never off them. What did that look like for you and why did you build that?
I actually love the harsh feedback. I mean, that really shows me where I need to, focus my energy. So I was in a group called Vistage, which is like a CEO roundtable group for people that are listening. And, that my team at Vistage told me that I should get a board of advisors because I need more outside thinkers that are kind of, seeing, my quarterly growth and stuff like that. And just having a little bit more of a true business, kind of sounding board besides my, friends and entrepreneurs. So I reached out to someone, his name's Bill Barkalow. He's an amazing entrepreneur and consultant, and he helped me identify a bunch of board members that had specific things I was looking for. One guy was an e-commerce expert. Another person was a marketing person. Another person was a CFO. And so I interviewed multiple people, within those spaces, and I found that right fit, and I had to really resonate with them. They had to really, understand the business and stuff like that. So I built that board, and I only changed that one person over the course of I think about 3 years that I had that board going. And it was really great having that consistent board to go to every quarter. And I presented like it was a true, board of directors. I was, very thorough in my, projections and data that I was sharing. And it was just great having them tell me, hey, Brian, you should really focus more energy here. I think you have potential here. It's some things maybe I just wasn't seeing because once again, they had the experience. They built companies, worth hundreds of millions of dollars and multiple of them. So they see the issues and opportunities.
And you gave them equity in the company? Like what did they?
No equity. I paid them, I paid them for each quarterly meeting. And frankly, these people like wanted to give back. I could tell too. Like they didn't need the money. They didn't want to do it for zero, but at the same time, they were very well off and they wanted to help other entrepreneurs kind of blossom.
And so you were basically paying them like an hourly fee almost. Like, hey, we're going to take out.
I paid them so low. I mean, part of it is I think I really resonate with people. So the people think wanted to work with me. If you put another person in that room, I don't know if they'd want to do it. But, I share things with them too. I mean, I love coming up with very creative ideas. I would talk to them about their businesses. I'd give them ideas too. So there's a little bit of that.
And so as a entrepreneur though, once again, you have so many things that are on your plate that you're working on. How do you end up finding the kind of time, energy, focus to go even recruit that board of directors and do that? And then like get on, I say this as a founder, obviously myself, I feel like I don't have barely any extra time at all. Like to go think about recruiting a board of a bunch of really smart people, I can imagine that being valuable. But I would also say like, if I only see them once a quarter and they're spending a few hours reading through my overview presentation about what we're doing, can they really provide me with high quality advice? Like, I don't know, they like dip into my business once a quarter and like, that's it. Seems like I'm not going to get a lot of advice.
Yeah. It definitely helped over time. I'm just saying the business, more and more each quarter. And I go to lunch with them maybe once or twice between the quarters, but there wasn't that many more touch points. When it comes to finding the time, I think I knew I needed to do it. If I want to get that company to the next level, I was already seeing, well, what if I sold a company or what if I, acquired another company? I needed to have a legitimate, sounding board for that. And I think it set me up to be a better run organization to ultimately be able to sell the business.
Okay, fair. Okay, so something you would advise. Do you think you should have done it sooner? I mean, if you only did it for 3 years, then it was really at the end of your tenure.
Yeah. I mean, way at the beginning, I probably wasn't ready, like, from year one. So I think I had to like build the business to a point where it made sense to go get a board. And most founders, probably right away don't want to spend, thousands of dollars to have, a board meeting. So I think you have to get to a point where, it makes sense that you're at, maybe a tipping point or something like that you need that outside advice.
It's fair. So on that note too, so going back to, we kind of skipped, we didn't really talk about growth, right? You talked about, hiring great people, but let's go back to growth itself. So you have this business, Sell Your Mac. How did you grow? How did you grow it? What were the key levers you thought about? I would love to talk a little bit about, should you acquire it? Like
SEO is number one.
So talk people through that. Search engine optimization. Why was that number one for you, and how did you get good at it?
Started with the domain name, sellyourmac.com. Helped out a lot. I don't know if it helps out as much anymore to have, the search term in the name, but back then it really mattered. And I created so much content for the site. There's over 4,000 pages of Mac content on our site. And that made it number one in the world for everything from, where to sell your Mac or best place to sell my MacBook Pro, whatever it is, we ranked at the top, and our main competitor at the top was Apple. So, good person to compete with. And it was bringing.
What percent of those 4,000 articles did you write, or did you hand off to other people to help write?
We figured out a way to use AI to write most of it.
Oh my gosh, that was like early days then to use AI. And it was good. It was good enough, I guess, that like high quality enough that it was fine.
Good enough. Yeah.
That's great. Do you still recommend that today? I mean, like obviously with the growth of AI overall, the value of content has gone down because there's so much of it. So how much do you think that's still a viable strategy for companies?
It's definitely one. I wouldn't put my, all my eggs in that basket, but I think if you're having a stool, that's definitely one of the legs that you want, is that content that's going to lead to SEO. If you have a B2B company, I mean, maybe it doesn't matter at all. I'm not sure, but a B2C company like we started, we need people to find us. And when they're going Google, it's a number one intent. When they're searching for where to sell my Mac, they want to sell it. It's the only thing they're thinking about. So if we're number one and we give them a fair price and it's an easy process, they're probably just going to go with us. So I wanted to be the most found, easiest, and fastest website to use.
Yep. Great point. So you built that out. Walk me through then what else? Like, is social a big part of it for you? Maybe not for your business directly, but obviously it's been for you. So like, what about social?
I wasn't that successful on Facebook and Instagram, doing any like major deals off that. But I was very successful on the LinkedIn side. And I found so many large business opportunities through LinkedIn. I mean, I've been doing over $1 million a year of buyback on LinkedIn for years.
Really? And by buyback, you mean finding people who have big amounts of Apple products?
Yes. Yep.
And they find you on LinkedIn, not through Google.
Correct. A lot of B2B deals on LinkedIn.
Do you think that's just because it's changed? Like people view LinkedIn as a better place to search for certain things nowadays, and they type in like sell Mac.
Not for search. They would just see my content. I was posting 3 times a day, 4 times a day back then. Now it's maybe 3 or 4 times a week. So I was pumping out content, getting millions of views. I mean, my best year, I had 150 million views.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
And that would lead to so many, requests, people connect with me, and my connections are maxed out. Now it's just followers, and I have so many people just sending me inbox requests of stuff that, they could sell me. And I made it way more of a point back in the day to talk way more about Apple, and that's all I talked about. But now it's, a lot more inspiration and stuff like that. But tip for people on LinkedIn, you actually get way more deals of stuff if you have a very good headline, not even talking about your business and your content. If you have fun content that's inspirational, kind, whatever it is, and they see your good headline, they'll click on it to go to your profile. And then you have to hit them with a really good, banner photo. Make sure they know what they're going to do when you see your banner photo. Yours, for example, it talks about, chores, right in the photo. People kind of get that right away. I understand what you do. I'll click to send you a message, and, then we can do business.
What do you think about content too on that front? So this is just my own personal curiosity to some extent, but like, should content from people be super focused? And this actually is a question I want to ask about the business too. Super focused or more diverse. So what I mean by that basically is you said you used to talk all that like Mac stuff, and now you said you've gone to more generic, general things. Is that because that was a just personal choice and you've kind of changed your persona? Or is that just a better way to do it? So like, should I be more, for me personally, should I be more focused on like, I'm just going to be talking solely about basically like the value of time. Like that's actually a personal pet peeve of mine and one that I think I want to be known for almost.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about that on socials, but also maybe should I just be more generic and talk about like, I saw you did a great post about Adam Sandler. I could be like, hey, Adam Sandler is super generous. And you had like 300 likes on that, like in comments. And I'm like, maybe I should just talk about just.
You'll get way more views if you post about generic stuff. That Adam Sandler post is over 250,000 views already.
Yeah, I saw that. It's crazy.
So you basically can't go viral posting about chore unless it's some super unique thing.
But does that reduce the like? If it is the goal as a entrepreneur, is it for me to go viral? Or is it to go build the business with the people who actually care about what I do? Like how
I'm going to say it's a little bit about both, because you want to bring outside people to your audience. So maybe the people that you do business with are going to resonate, more with the chore post. But to get more people looking at your profile and content in general, you can shoot the wide net. And then those people end up liking your actual focused content more. And then that'll spread to more people. So you want to get people that maybe even aren't your core customer that are just liking your content, because then more of your core customers will potentially see it.
Okay, that's fair. So it's a little so.
And I would say about 10% of your content should actually be about chore.
Okay, really? That's higher than I would actually. I'm like, I don't want to oversell chore. I just want to sell the thesis to some extent.
Yeah. So post one time about chore each week, and post 5-6 times about something else.
Okay, I can do that. Okay, so social it was somewhat successful on LinkedIn for you. That was pretty good. Did you guys do advertising? Did you do, what else was working?
No, not on LinkedIn. Google Ads, those have been very successful. Once again, going back to that point of intent, I didn't do a lot of top of the funnel. I just hit the bottom of the funnel hard. People are already coming top of the funnel on Google. I just made sure we, close them.
Okay. And when you say bottom of the funnel, how did you close them? Because you're doing high volume stuff. So it's just like, they show up to the website, you're doing retargeting, hitting them up, like, hey, like, let's get the sale done.
Well, the quote only takes a minute to go through. So, once you're there, you just make sure they fill it out. And if not, you retarget them.
Fair. Okay. Although you've also built your persona to some extent, like, you're not wearing your blue suit right now, but like you are the MacMan who wears his blue suit.
I did wear an Apple shirt today though,
which is good. I appreciate it. So how does that all get set for you? Like, what did that look like to create your own persona around?
I think you have to be really unique. If you want to stand out in any social, you have to, stand for something and, look a certain way and be consistent. So I was very consistent in that blue suit. I show up, blue basically everywhere I go. If I'm in any kind of, conference or any public event, always in the blue suit. So you get known for it. And people, recognize me for that blue suit. So I think there's a lot to go into personal branding just by being consistent. And, everyone knows me as the MacMan, and that brings, tons of business my way, whether it's for the Apple business or anything else I want to start.
It also makes it easy to know what to pack on a business trip.
Two blue suits. Let's go.
I want to be careful about time too and cognizant of that. But can we go over a few minutes, by the way? Are you okay?
Sure.
Great. But I'll be careful about it still because I have some other stuff later. But a few questions then. We talk about growth. Let's talk about selling your business. What made you decide 18 and a half years in, I'm going to sell my business now? Why then? Why sell in the first place? This is your persona. This is who you are. This is what you do. You have a good thing going. You're the boss man. You got it all going. Why sell?
The legacy of keeping it going was, very key to me. I wanted the team members to stay on. Didn't want any of that to change. So it had to be the right fit. And, this company was very strategic. I didn't want to just sell to some, random PE firm and just, have them run it and keep me on as the CEO in the future. This company, OWC, bleeds Apple stuff. The founder's been around. He started the company himself 35 years ago, super, super focused on Apple, big Apple fanboy himself. So, we hit it off that way. And he wanted to keep the team there. He wanted to keep the facility going. And all that mattered a lot to me. He said he wants to grow the business and keep everyone there. That was very exciting. I wanted to grow the business bigger. And, like I said, I hadn't raised any money, anything to date. And I saw this as a, way that I could get some of my personal goals checked off without having to go out, finding money. I kind of took away the risk, in my life of, holding the business. I didn't pull enough money out of the business, maybe throughout it. So this was, definitely a game-changing moment that I was able to take some chips off the table and, ensure that my family would be good in the future. And the family was one of the biggest reasons I sold, is I had, multiple kids and a third kid that I just had at that point. And I wanted to spend more time with the family. And being a CEO, as you know, is absolutely exhausting. And I wasn't sure if I'd have the energy or the physical time to be with them. And I didn't want to be thinking about, taking care of customer service and HR issues at night when I actually should be spending time with my family and enjoying my dinner.
I hear that and respect it, and that's why Troy exists, for at least some of that. But to the point, okay, but why then were they people you had known for a while? Did they come in and slowly build a relationship with you, or did they just show up one day? I was like, hey, Brian, we want to buy your business. Here's an offer.
They'd been buying from us for a while, and we'd been buying off them about a bunch of parts for a long time. I think I was a customer for over a decade. So yeah, we had a long relationship, and nothing had ever come up about, buying or selling the company until it did. So it was very interesting that, they'd been buying us for years, and they saw the potential to, take over all of our trade-in business. And it was a great fit, and, we made it happen.
And once again, why did you sell when you did? Was it because of the family stuff? Was it just, hey man, I've been doing it for 18 and a half years. What was the reason underlying the timing? In retrospect, would you have done anything different?
I mean, a lot of factors went into it, but yes, I had already been grinding for, almost 20 years in the business, and, it is exhausting. So I wanted to both step back from in terms of a, mental commitment, and also to take some chips off the table. And to get chips off the table, otherwise I would have had to raise some money. So it was a great way to, do that for myself and my family. In hindsight, maybe I wish I did it earlier, because I'm really enjoying, living life in Florida and stepping away from the company of having to be the sole leader. But it worked out, the timing. So I'm happy we at least did it then.
Yeah, in a sense, no regrets, right? You can't be regretting almost anything overall.
No regrets.
So walk me through then to kind of bring things around to some extent at the end of things, right? Walk me through how you viewed at the time you're running Sell Your Mac into today. How do you view life versus work, work-life balance, work-life unity? I think some people talk about. What does that look like for you when you're thinking through those sorts of things? And what advice would you give to founders about how to try to manage both? Or can you manage both, right? Or do you just have...
It's really hard to win on all those. I mean, how do you be healthy and be a good family person and a good CEO all at the same time. It's almost not even possible. So
how did you do it? Or how did you do it? Or you were not. Your wife might say, if you were on this call, might say, well, Brian was pretty bad for about 10 years of our relationship or something.
she would say that I was stressed and, maybe, a little bit meaner at times because you're so mentally overrun that you're not thinking things through before, you react or say something to your partner, your kids. So I think now I'm able to step back, be more mindful of, how I'm acting and what I'm saying to my family, and have more time to work on my health and my fitness. I mean, just moving to Florida in the last year and a half, I'm down 20 some pounds. And it's just,
congratulations. It's great.
Thank you. I'm just spending a little bit more time, being healthy, and I'm outdoors every day, which is, a nice perk.
What advice would you sort of tell your younger self when it comes to the combination? I mean, this relates to my final question as well, but that relates to yourself of like your younger self related to like work-life balance to some extent. Would you say, hey, look, if you're an entrepreneur, that doesn't exist and you have to just go all in on your business, or you can have it somewhat both ways, or you just have to decide like what kind of life you want? Like, how would you describe this for your, if you could?
I think you have to decide what kind of life you want. If I want to retire young, I had to work extra hard when I was, in my younger years. If I'm fine working till I'm 65, well, then maybe I could have a better work-life balance. But I didn't have a great balance. I would live my life with my work always traveling with me. I mean, I'd be out of the country on a vacation, but still working, at night. So I had to just kind of plow through life, with work at every stage. And yes, I could have stopped to live life more, but if I did, then I would be, working longer, let's say.
So that's actually sort of an interesting philosophical question. It's like, is it better to work really, like grind really hard early on and sort of finish earlier, or grind less hard and sort of have a more stable?
I think everyone has to pick their path. I mean, if you want to, live a more relaxed life, but you want to work your whole life, that's a good option for you. But if you want to work your ass off when you're young and you have the energy, then grind when you're young. And I think that we do have way more energy when we're young. I mean, I frankly can't work 18 hours a day anymore. I don't even know how I did it, but I was on repeat. I mean, 7 days a week.
No, I know the feeling.
I mean, in your 20s, you can do it.
No, that's the thing. You can do it. You can kind of build a muscle for it too, to some extent, but it's hard. Walk me through a little bit too around like going back to selling the company a little bit, but around, I mean, a lot of the founders I have in the show are repeat multiple time founders. When you sell your company, you kind of lose your identity a little bit in who you are.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that as a founder? Like, you are the MacMan, and you still are the MacMan, and you will always be the MacMan, but it's a little bit different when you're not running the company the same way. How do you handle the loss of identity and what that does to your own sense of like self or ego or worth?
I think fortunately for me, I was able to keep, the MacMan identity, being the MacMan there. I'm not the chief MacMan anymore, but I still get to buy and sell Apple products and talk to all of my, Apple connections all day. But, after that, I think there is, a sense of loss that, I've been performing in this MacMan role for so long. It's hard to want to give that up. And when people, know you as that, I mean, my friends just call me MacMan when they see me instead of Brian. So I built it up so much that I don't want to give it away. I still want to be the MacMan. And I think I've accepted the fact that I'm not going to be, the chief MacMan and CEO anymore. And that transition probably took me the first year. And it was a weird feeling. And, you had to just kind of get okay with it. There's no easy way to do it. I mean, the day you sell your company, it just kind of cut off and you're like, oh my God, I don't make the decisions anymore, and things happen and the site changes and you just have to be okay with it. And your baby that you built up, it changes, and you have to be able to step back and just be okay with that decision that, yes, you sold the company. This was the right thing for you and your family. Things change. It's okay. And you can still move forward and, be happy in your life, regardless of what happens with that, current business and, entity.
And when you think through like future decisions in life, like obviously you're happy with where you are, it's going well, but you might not be working there forever. Let's just say it that way. And they probably don't expect it necessarily either. What is that, when you think through future life decisions, how does that lead to what are the things you think about? You're like, oh, I want to work really hard. I want to build a new legacy, or I built my legacy, or I just want to spend time with my kids and really enjoy them being young in this sort of special time. What are elements that go into your head when you think through about your sort of second, or on a given you your sort of third, fourth, fifth act? But like,
Sure.
What does that look like?
Well, us talking about things that we're passionate in, I would never start a business or do anything I'm not passionate in anymore. So, I have a couple side hustles I'm doing right now. For one, I bought a yacht recently, and I've been renting that out, and things like that. I just enjoyed boating, so I wanted.
Sounds like a big thing. I want to ask them, like, what is a yacht? How is a yacht defined? Like, are we talking like?
It's a small one, 37 feet. But
okay, so is that even a yacht? How do you define a yacht then? What does that mean?
The classification actually is that, you're able to have a different number of people than there's like seats and seatbelt. It's not like you can have a large number of people on board.
That's dope. All right, cool.
But, I was very passionate about boating when I, had a boat at a lake, a few years ago, and I wanted to live on the water, which, I'm very fortunate that I am now. So I wanted to spend more time actually on the water. So I figured I'd learn about boating, and I went a little bit deep on it. I got this thing called Merchant Mariner credentials. So I'm allowed to captain a boat, and also I could serve on a Navy vessel in time of war voluntarily if I wanted to, which I'm not planning on. But,
that's sort of kind of war. You would never have to even have that decision. But
I wanted to learn about that. So this was, kind of the avenue to do that. And, being a business person, I thought of how can I do this, the most tax advantage, way possible. And it was to start a small business around it. And as I think about new things I want to go deep on, I'm always, now that I understand how to do a business, even if it's not going to be there's no employees in this yacht business, just to clarify. But I can start all these little side businesses and, earn a little bit of money by doing things I love. Recently I started doing, AI classes last year, and I kicked it off with Vistage business groups, and people hired me to come talk to, their board or marketing team to teach all the executives, how to use AI in ways that maybe they're not familiar with yet. And that's kind of just fun for me. I get to be in a room with a bunch of smart people, teaching them about something that they don't know about, and they really value, what I can bring to the table. So doing more things like that in the future, that brings me energy. I want to get in the room, whether I'm learning or teaching something that I'm very passionate about.
So, I mean, as we get toward near the end, the summary, I would say, tell me if this is accurate, but the summary for you in as an entrepreneur is actually the willingness and ability to just follow your passions and let that drive what you go after and do, but go deep on those things. And that's the thing with a lot of people. They don't actually go deep on their passions. And like, to be clear, being passionate about like Instagram generally isn't good. Now, you can actually make a lot of money. If you're really passionate about Instagram, you can be really good. Or, Mr. Beast is really passionate about YouTube videos, and he went deeper than anyone. Like, he is a YouTube savant.
He might buy TikTok now.
I know. Seriously, right? Like, then he went really deep. He went really, really deep. Yes. He got really good. And most people don't have that. And that's really the takeaway that I have from you, is the willingness and ability to go really deep on something because you enjoy it.
It's so much easier that your energy doesn't go down. Like, when I spend a lot of time on something I love, I'm not tired after I've, researched it or, read about it for hours on end. I'm actually even more energized. It's like when you go do a workout, you think that expelling energy to make you tired actually increases your energy overall. And I don't think people realize that. They think being lazy, just sitting around, actually go do a workout, I have way more energy afterwards.
It's a great analogy and so true. So on
that's why I started a podcast called Bullish and Beyond, is because I'm so passionate about stocks that I want to give away the tips that I do have, and so we all can build wealth together.
Which is a win-win-win. I hope we have a chance to go that.
We will.
So to kind of round it out, the question I like to ask everybody at the end of the show is, if there's one piece of advice, if you could boil all your learnings of almost 20 years of Sell Your Mac and I don't know what, 30 plus years of being your own entrepreneur, what is that advice that you would give to people?
I would say follow your inner voice, because everyone tries to tell you, what to do from their perspective, but they're not you. And it's only you that's going to have the passion and grit to push through. So focus on what you're passionate about and do something you truly love and go deep.
I love that. Well, Brian, one, I'm for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into us having a long debate about why Apple has lost its fairy. It needs to be way smarter about AI because it's, as an Apple person myself, used to be. I appreciate your hopefulness. I think Apple has worked themselves into a corner when it comes to privacy, which I appreciate. But they've also,
that is tough.
They've made it way harder to make AI really successful. And the pace is so fast, and they are not known as a software company. And these little devices, glass devices we carry in our pocket, are now just a connection to the internet into your AI bot, essentially. And therefore, Apple's going to, when the actual device itself doesn't matter all that much, Apple is going to be in a real different place. So I don't know.
I will throw out one caveat, so I can't not respond to this. Is that I think that Apple's on-screen intelligence will be the game changer that we're all kind of waiting for. Because the current iteration of Apple Intelligence, I mean, the writing tools and the snippets, very nice to have, but it's not game changer for me. But the on-screen awareness, if it can interact with any app and understand anything happening on my screen, that actually I think is going to matter. And developers haven't had the time. I mean, the tools aren't even available through the APIs to add on-screen awareness yet. So I think it might be a couple of years out till it's truly at the level where every app has it integrated. And this is iOS 19 on the iPhone 17, Air coming out. So hopefully that is game changer and remains to be seen. I think we're not going to know for 1 to 2 years.
Let's cross our fingers because the world in that is pretty exciting and bright. We're not there yet. I hope Apple figures it out because I do like having sort of everything in the ecosystem. It's nice, but I will say there are devices from some other companies that are really starting to tempt me in the integration with AI that other companies are already pushing with Google and things like that is pretty powerful and starting to be tempting enough to move away. I've done it yet, but thinking about it. But Brian, where can people find you if they want to learn more about Sell Your Mac, about you, your journey, those sorts of questions? Where can folks find you?
Well, if they want to go to Sell Your Mac, it's very easy. It's sellyourmac.com. To find me, the best person is LinkedIn. Search for Brian Burke. I'm the guy in the blue suit. I got the blue bow tie on. You won't be able to miss me.
Excellent. Brian, thank you so much for your time. It is precious. I appreciate it. And this
has been a fun podcast. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to you later.
More chatting in the future. See you, everyone.
Yeah.